Welcome to Front Up on Geno Channel 99. I'm Dan Drake, and I'm honored to be the first person to sit in this chair since it was vacated by the untimely passing of Whitey Willauer last summer. And we hope to continue in his tradition and maybe even take it a step further. But I will say that Whitey was a man who loved this island, cared about this island a great deal, and put his money where his mouth was in terms of getting things accomplished. Our guest today is VernLaux10, the resident naturalist at the Linda Loring Nature Foundation. And I'd like to talk with Vern a little bit about how he got into birding, why he got into birding, and then get on into the birding festival that's going on this weekend.
Well, thank you, Dan. I'm delighted to be here. Whitey was amazing. That was a very nice tribute. I sat in on this very couch, I believe, a year ago or a little more, and talked to Whitey about the birding festival. So I think it's fitting. I'm really delighted to be here. And bird watching's not for everybody. It's not called bird watching anymore. It's called birding. I like to think of it as a sport. It's sometimes a contact sport, but it's not the little old ladies in tennis shoes that everybody purports or thinks about it. In fact, anyone watching this, if they've been thinking of going birding, I would encourage you wholeheartedly to get outside. I lead a bird walk every Wednesday morning for the Linda Loring Nature Foundation. Love to have you on it. And it's really, you'll have a lot more fun than you think, and maybe you won't think birders are so odd.
I should disclose that I am the chairman of the board of directors of the Linda Loring Nature Foundation, just so everybody knows and doesn't start talking.
I guess you could call Dan sort of my boss in a way, because he's the head of the board, but we have a good relationship. Anyway.
How did you get into birding?
I got interested in birds when I was 12, and I had a science teacher. I grew up in suburban Boston in Wellesley, and I played football and then basketball. It came time at Thanksgiving, he put up a chart on my teacher, whose name was Doug Sands, and said, there's going to be a bird quiz. I want everyone to study this chart and learn all the birds. There was like 18 species on there. I was kind of a wise guy in junior high. I didn't look at the chart. Came time to take the quiz. I called every bird a chickadee. I flunked. Not good. The next week, he brought in a dead bird and whacks it down in front of the room and says, "Whoever can identify this bird gets an A on the next test." And I'm like, aha, well, I certainly need to do something about my grades. And so I went home. No one in my family was remotely interested in anything to do with the outdoors, birding and fish. I was like some throwback from... So we had Encyclopedia Britannicas, and I started looking, and I realized I'm never going to figure out what this bird is. So then I knew there was a gentleman that lived on my same street whose son was a bird watcher, and I called down there and asked if he's home. No, he's not there, but what's it about? And I got his father, Big Bob Forster. Bob was the head of Honeywell Corporation of North America, and we were all really afraid of him in the neighborhood. So he said, "What's it about?" And I told him, and so I'm going to come up to the house. Hour later, he came up to my house with a Peterson field guide, the first one I ever saw, the field guide of the birds. And anyway, long story short, I went in Monday morning, or long story longer. I went in Monday morning with a list of 400 birds, and I didn't get it. It wasn't on there. And the bird was a Virginia rail, a little, about a robin-sized bird. You've heard the expression, thin as a rail. Well, rails are marsh birds, and they run through the marsh grasses, and they're almost like shapeshifters. They can... Back when everybody used to salt marsh hay and mow marshes to feed their livestock, the rails would flatten right out like a snake, and they run through and you don't see them, and hence the expression thin as a rail. Anyway, then I went on my first Christmas count that year, and so by the age 12, I had become a bird watcher, but a birder. Back then it was a bird watcher.
But how did you get converted to a birder?
Well, it's just... You couldn't tell anybody. I mean, being a birder in the 8th grade, like and all through high school, was a horrible thing. I like to, when I was on the football team in high school, when I was a sophomore, and some of the seniors found out I was a birder, and there was a big fight in the showers. Everybody got bloody, and then they left me alone, and I was looking for them on the field. Anyway, I was the only bird watcher on the football field, the only birder, and then. I always thought it would just kind of go away, but my interest grew and grew. And then when I was in high school, I got a call from Massachusetts Audubon Society, the vice president, asking me if I'd be interested in working at the Wellfleet Bay Wildlife Sanctuary. which had four-wheel drive trucks. We were leading tours down Nauset Beach and Monomoy Island, which was fantastic. So for the next 5 summers and beyond, I was leading shorebird tours, and then and then I decided I needed to see every bird in North America by the time I got out of college. So of course, I took a year off in Alaska in between, and then my junior year I went to University of Arizona because I needed the birds of the desert Southwest, and it just kept getting worse. And now I've been to all 7 continents, and I just love looking at birds.
Have you done this? There was a movie recently called The Great Year, or The Grand...
The Big Year.
The Big Year, that's right. It was about people who try to see how many birds they can see in a year. The
Big Year was written by a reporter for the Denver Post. I think it was 2004. And I got sent, before it even went to publication, they sent me a manuscript to go through because I have participated in some of these crazy things around North America. I read this and I made some suggestions that they then incorporated in the book. And it's about a big year is that year, these 3 guys, one very wealthy, one with a lot of money, a lot of resources, another guy sort of middle of the road, the other guy whose marriage is falling apart, he doesn't have the money, but he's just a rabid bird watcher and he goes out anyway to do it. And it's it's a really good book. I have not, I'm embarrassed to say, seen the movie yet. I was going, and it only lasted in the theaters 2 weeks. But it's funny, the Nantucket has a really big tie to this movie because Ben Stiller bought the movie rights to this book, The Big Year, for like $1 million. And nobody buys movie rights to a book about birds or bird watchers. And then they rewrote the script. They got, Steve Martin, Jack Black. You've seen it?
Yes, I have seen it.
Yeah, and it's pretty entertaining, I would guess.
Very entertaining.
And I just think it's nice that a Nantucketer took the chance and then they filmed it. And
have you tried to do something like that? See how many birds you could see in a year?
I have not done it on the continental scale yet.
What is your lifetime bird list? What's it up to?
I don't know. I really don't. But taxonomy keeps changing, and it seems like every generation of ornithologists, well, there's like lumpers and splitters. So, they prove yellow-shafted flicker in the east and red-shafted flicker where they meet in the plains. There's a tiny, tiny little area where there are hybrids occasionally. So that they were lumped, and they were all called northern flickers. Well, now it seems like everything's getting split. So 3 years ago, there were 10,000 species anyway.
Let's talk about Nantucket. Why is Nantucket such a good birding place?
Well, the same reason it's such a nice place to visit, because it's so far out to sea. And the fall season, in fact, on this weekend, right now, on Thursday, we're taping this, you don't need to know when, the 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, we're running the 2nd annual Nantucket.
But before we get into that, just sort of talk a little more about why Nantucket is such a special place for the birds.
Right now in October and September, the bird population is at its all-time high for the year. So the populations are cyclic, so it's the end of the breeding season. The robins have had 3 or 4 broods, and so there are many more. The population is 5 times more than it will be coming back in the spring. And most of the birds migrate, and most of them, the land birds, are nocturnal migrants. So they leave and they wait for the right wind direction, which is northwest. And then, so that means the wind is coming from the northwest. The birds are flying southeast. Look at Nantucket, look at New England, look at Canada. Everything is northwest of here, all the land. So and of course, all these young birds are not, they're prone to make mistakes. A lot of birds get up on a northwest wind and they travel. They're flying at 30 miles an hour with a 10-mile-an-hour tailwind, so their ground speed is about 40 miles an hour. As the sun comes up, after a nice light northwest wind, they realize that, they look down and there's nothing but water everywhere. They've overshot, and it's fatal for a land bird to land in the water. The gulls, anyway. So they turn around and realize they have to come back. Nantucket's like a life ring thrown out there in the ocean. So stuff that's been coming in all day long on a big front. If you're out at Sconset, anywhere on the east side, you'll see little birds flying back in, and literally, if you're on the beach, they'll just come right by you and land in the trees. A lot of them don't make it, and the gulls sit out there, and the falcons, and they see these exhausted birds coming in, and they'll often capture and knock sparrows into the water and eat them. Conversely, then the west end of the island, at Smith's Point and Eel Point, the birds, it acts as a funneling point as they go, and you can often see literally thousands, clouds of birds migrating back to the west, to the mainland. So it's just, and because we're so far out to sea, we have the best gull show on the eastern seaboard, actually in the whole country. The only place better might be Niagara Falls, right as it's about to freeze up, because every gull in a huge area gets concentrated in there, and but Nantucket's great. And there's a lot of conservation land, and plus it's pretty.
And the birds like that.
Well, I know the bird is like that.
That wasn't a question.
It's not like birding Cape May where things are scattered. And Cape May is just not nearly as beautiful as it is here, you know.
Now, to celebrate this, the Lyndon Loring Nature Foundation started the first annual birding festival
a year ago, yeah.
And weren't there a couple of notable sightings in that?
You couldn't have scripted it better for the first birding festival. As the festival was beginning on a late Thursday afternoon, a magnificent frigate bird, a giant bird that looks like with the highest aspect ratio between giant, they call them man-of-war birds. They make a living by stealing things from other birds and or knocking them down and eating them. There was one flying around the harbor. Jeff Carlson spotted it over the town dock, and then it spent the afternoon just hanging over the Brant Point Lighthouse and stuff. So some birders coming for the festival literally got to see the frigate bird as they were getting off the ferry or coming through, and there hadn't been a frigate bird here in about 18 or 20 years. Usually they're storm related after a hurricane. The next day, as if they knew the festival was on, a really great looking flycatcher with a long tail, aptly named the scissor-tailed flycatcher, was found out on Hummock Pond Road. And everybody went berserk to see that. Everyone got to see it. The next morning, we had a couple of incredible birds. We had that was only the 5th record for scissor-tailed flycatcher. And then the next morning, down at Mattakit, all the way out by Smith Point, a western bird that lives in the mountains called the Townsend Solitaire was discovered, flying, and everyone got to see it, including Edith Andrews, who at 97 years old, it was a life bird for her. It was a new bird for Nantucket, which delighted especially the island birders. But so it was, and then we had a Connecticut warbler hit the mist nets. We have a banding operation running every morning out at Edith's house. And it was just, and the weather was perfect.
You have almost 60 people coming for this year's festival.
We have about, I think, 56 and 12 leaders and some other guests. So yeah, there'll be about 70 people out in the field.
How far away do people come from to
well, it's on a lot of people. And of course, a lot of people, you know, the notoriety from this thing from the first year. Plus, we really have it put together so it's a really inexpensive. It's really a great deal. And for people that don't live here, you couldn't come here for a weekend at this price. We have a special deal with the High Line. We've got a great deal at the hotel. The Beachside has given us a fabulous rate. We've got, you know, we're renting buses from the Nantucket Island Tours. It's a really nice package. Well, we have a gentleman from Hawaii that came. That's pretty far. I don't know if we have any Brits this year, and then a lot of people, some DC, New York City, a lot of people Connecticut, a few Cape Cod, and I think we've had 8 or 10 Islanders sign up.
Is there any thing like this anywhere nearby?
Well, there are birding festivals all over the country, and in fact, the oldest one is down in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, and this is I think it's its 29th year. Cape May, they run one, New Jersey Audubon. There is not another birding festival that I'm aware of in the state even, although there's a lot of interest. I've had people calling from the Cape. They want to start a Cape Cod, Outer Cape Cod birding festival next year. And they're basically, they go on our website.
You're going to tell them to do it in May, aren't you?
Well, I said, don't do it the weekend I'm doing it. Good Lord, you know, there's enough things to do. So a nice thing about this too is, you know, we're 2 weeks after Columbus Day is when we're doing it. So the wedding season's over. The island is really a lot less crowded. And it turns out that if global warming appears to be real and birds are migrating in the past 15 years, they're migrating south later in the fall and earlier in the spring. So whereas what used to be Labor Day weekend was that now Columbus Day has been better and even later. And the way the weather is setting up right now, it was blowing 75 miles an hour in South Dakota last night. And that frontal system, this strong, it's moving counterclockwise. Anyway, the winds are just ideal to blow stuff out to Nantucket. So
what is going to be the unique bird this year?
well, you know, if I knew that, I'd know what stocks to buy. If I could predict what was going to happen in the future. But when you get this many birders, and we've got a lot of really good birders that are our participants, as well as the leaders. We've got some of the top birders really in the country coming. You let all these guys go and ladies go at the same time, and it's like it's like a magic birding effect. We'll find stuff that we don't know. We're hoping no bird can escape detection over the next few days. Of course, that's
a good way to leave it. I wish you success with the festival. And,
well, thank you very much.
Continuing your
and
your
congratulations for sitting in the seat vacated by the late great Whitey. So good luck with it.
Thanks, VernLaux.
Thank you.